Remember, remember the 5th of November, gunpowder treason and plot. I see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Guy Fawkes, 'twas his intent to blow up the king and the parliament. 70 barrels of powder below, poor old England to overthrow. By God's providence he was catched, with a dark lantern and a burning match. Holla boys, let the bells ring. Holla boys, God save the king. Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. So that little poem that you just heard gives a bit of a clue as to what today's video is about. Currently in London at the moment, in the Tower Vaults to be precise, is a new immersive experience by Layered Reality, the same company who produced the War of the Worlds immersive experience a few years previously, if you have heard anything about that before. But this time they have partnered with none other than Historic Royal Palaces, and the script was written by Danny Robbins, writer of 222, A Ghost Story, and the amazing Uncanny podcast series. If you're into your ghost stories, I'd highly recommend it if you haven't listened to it already. So with this new immersive experience, it's basically a pretty well-known event to Brits. I remember being taught the history of the Gunpowder Plot in school and how this group of men tried to blow up Parliament and the king, and we celebrated it being foiled every year on the 5th of November as something called Bonfire Night. Sometimes there's a bonfire with an actual guy thrown on it. Normally it's either a random person that, like, just as an anonymous guy, or it might be at the time like the hated politician or someone is just thrown onto the bonfire. That's normally when we say guy, that's normally what happens. But most of the time these days I think it's purely just an excuse to set off a shit ton of fireworks. But how many Brits actually remember or even know the story behind Bonfire Night? Or do they even care, to be honest? And how many non-Brits know why the face of Guy Fawkes is so widely recognised these days as the face of a freedom fighter and used as a symbol by groups such as Anonymous? Well, I thought before I actually gave my review of this actual experience, I would give sort of like a short history lesson, seeing as I really don't think my review would have the same impact for those who don't really know anything about the actual historic facts of what happened to bring about the annual celebration of Bonfire Night. So this is my telling of the history behind the Gunpowder Plot and how we came to Bonfire Night. So in order to understand fully the reason for the plot, we'd have to go way back, like way back to the year of 1527, when Henry VIII, if people remember him or know who he is, basically he was Tudor king who had famously had 6 wives. So basically the year 1527 was the year when Henry VIII was looking to annul his first marriage to Catherine of Aragon so he could marry his mistress Anne Boleyn. It took a total of 6 years for Henry to actually break away from the Catholic Church and also the Pope in Rome in order to get the outcome that he finally wanted, because they would not let him have the divorce. This was the beginning of what is known as the Reformation in England and the start of the king being the head of the church and the state. England, however, didn't really become fully Protestant country until the succession of Henry's only son, Edward VI, as Henry still followed a lot of the customs and a lot of the practices from the Catholic religion at that time. So young Edward didn't actually live to be king for that long, so he was quickly succeeded by Mary I, his sister, or Bloody Mary as a lot of people remember her for, as history affectionately remembers her for the burning of 300 Protestants during her reign. She tried to bring back Catholicism to England and made the Pope the head of the church once again. But because of the reforms that Edward had actually brought in during his reign, and because Mary's reign was only like 5 years long, she didn't live that long either when she came to the throne, meant it was easy for Elizabeth I to actually bring back Protestantism as the chief religion again. So Elizabeth I actually ruled for an incredibly long time, 44 years to be exact. And when you think of the fact that the average lifespan in that time was around 42 years, 44 years is a very long time for someone to be on the throne, especially when you think Edward was on the throne only for a couple of years, and then his sister Mary was only on the throne for 5 years as well. So yeah, very long reign. And during that reign, she was able to establish a more moderate settlement and passed on the Act of Uniformity, which was an attempt at placating both Protestants and Catholics alike with the English prayer book. Both interpretations of the communion were allowed. And that's normally where the education kind of ends in England when it comes to learning about Good Queen Bess and her treatment of the Catholics. What people failed to mention was that Catholic priests were actually banned, and in 1585 any priest who was ordained abroad would be named a traitor on coming back to England, and if they were caught could be doomed to be hanged, drawn and quartered. Mass was forbidden, and even rosaries that had been blessed in Rome were to be destroyed, and practicing Catholicism became an act of treason. So while Mary I is remembered for the persecution and burning of Protestants, Elizabeth wasn't exactly innocent when it came to the persecuting of Catholics, but she was a bit more smart about it in terms of she had them executed for treason rather than burning them at the stake for heresy. More than 100 Catholic priests were known to have been executed under Elizabeth I's reign. So upon Elizabeth's death in 1603, her successor was James VI of Scotland, who then became James I of England. And there was hope among Catholics that James would be more understanding, considering his mother was Mary Queen of Scots, who was a Catholic, and she had actually been part of a plot to supplant Elizabeth and make England a Catholic country again. But ultimately, because of that plot, she lost her head in 1587. So James I's wife, Anne of Denmark, had also converted to Catholicism, which further gave hope to the Catholics that there would be more tolerance under James's reign. But unfortunately, they were very much mistaken. Not only did James inherit the crown from Elizabeth, he also inherited her incredibly anti-Catholic court, as well as having several plots against him, either to kidnap him and threaten him to repeal anti-Catholic legislation, or just to completely overthrow him and replace him with his Catholic cousin, Arabella Stuart. And you can imagine this naturally led to James having this real mistrust of Catholics from basically the beginning of his reign. And it was actually in 1604 he made a speech in Parliament and he publicly stated that he detested Catholics and ordered all Jesuit and Catholic priests to leave the realm. So this is where the origins of the Gunpowder Plot come from. It was the brainchild of a group of 5 conspirators. So you had Robert Catesby, Thomas Winter, Jack White, Thomas Percy and Guy Fawkes. There were 6 others that came along later, and that was Robert Keyes, Robert Winter, John Grant, Kit Wright, Thomas Bates, Ambrose Rookwood, Sir Everard Digby and Francis Tresham. Like, they joined later, but you have the 5 main conspirators. The ultimate aim was to assassinate the king while he was in Parliament and to replace him with his daughter Elizabeth, who was 9 at the time, to be a puppet queen for the Catholics. The plan involved storing huge amounts of gunpowder in the cellars underneath the Houses of Parliament and lighting them when the king was actually present at the opening of Parliament on the 5th of November 1605. However, on the 26th of October, an anonymous letter was received by the Catholic peer Lord Monteagle. In it, he was told not to attend Parliament on the 5th of November as this Parliament will receive a terrible blow, but they will not see who it is that hurts them. It is still not known who actually wrote this letter. There are several theories about it, one being that because he was the brother-in-law of one of the conspirators, Francis Tresham, Lord Monteagle knew of the plot and wrote the letter himself in order to win favour with the king. Or there is the other theory that it could have been actually Francis that wrote the letter to warn his brother-in-law and fellow Catholic to not actually be present that day. We still don't know. Either way, Lord Monteagle passed the letter on to Robert Cecil, who was James's chief advisor, and the plot was sort of somewhat foiled at that point. So basically, Cecil decided to take his time and wanted to wait until the day before the plot took place. And on that day, he sent men into the cellars underneath Parliament to look for any sort of evidence they might find. What they actually found there was a man called Guy Fawkes, who was found there along with a large pile of firewood, but he actually gave his name at that time as John Johnson. Genius, I know. And he said that the firewood was actually meant for his master, Thomas Percy. He'd asked him to put it there. Thomas Percy was actually a known Catholic agitator at the time. So obviously this sent alarm bells ringing to the men. So basically King James demanded that they send in more men again on the day of the plot to see if they can actually find more evidence and actually try and foil the plot then and there. So basically on the 5th of November, Guy Fawkes was found again in the cellar, but this time with a lamp, matches and 36 barrels of gunpowder. Guy Fawkes was immediately arrested and sent to the Tower of London to be interrogated. So I can still remember being told this at school about how he was so cruelly tortured for weeks on end just so they could try and get the names of his fellow conspirators out of him. And eventually they did, unfortunately, because they just did so much, and they pretty much nearly killed him in order to get this information out of him. And one of the most famous pieces from the time, like artifacts that we still have, is the signature from his confession, and also like you can compare it with signature that was taken before and then the signature after, and you can see just how much it affected him in terms of the torture that he had actually received, the fact that he can barely write his own name. So Robert Catesby, Thomas Percy and Jack and Kit Wright were actually killed when they tried to flee before capture, but the rest of the conspirators were finally captured and they were sent to the Tower, and they were found guilty of treason on the 26th of January 1606 and all were sentenced to be hanged, drawn and quartered just a few days later. And this is where another prevailing legend comes from Guy Fawkes, and that was after all of the other conspirators had been hanged, drawn and quartered. And obviously with hanging, drawing and quartering, it's supposed to be that they hang you until you're basically almost dead but you're still alive. Then they take you down and they basically gut you. That's what it means by being drawn. They gut you, take out all your innards. I think you get castrated as well. And then basically, so all this is happening while you're still alive, and then when you die they chop off your head and chop off all your limbs and they send you to opposite ends of the country. In Guy Fawkes' case, even though he'd been under so much torture, and I think they said he went on the rack was a particularly favourite method of torture at the time, where they basically stretch you to your joints and all your ligaments are just pulled out of their sockets and everything. He literally had to be dragged to the scaffold because he could not walk. Like I said, the fact that he could barely write his own name shows just what a state he was in. And yeah, he was dragged to the scaffold, had the noose around his neck, and somehow, I mean, there's two sides to the story. There's either that he tripped and fell, or the prevailing myth is that he found the last ounce of strength in him to be able to jump from the scaffold to the point that he actually broke his neck, so died instantly rather than going through even more torture his fellow conspirators actually went through. And I think the myth of him jumping is seen to be, it's the most prevailing theory because it's seen as basically his one last act of defiance against the king. So after this event, there was an act of parliament that was passed that made it law to celebrate the foiling of the plot, and it made it basically compulsory to attend church on the 5th of November every year to give thanks for the survival of the king against these evil conspirators. This act actually remained in force until 1859, but the British public just kept up that tradition, and to this day, like I said, people still celebrate it as bonfire night, whether or not they remember the reason why. And Parliament still has its own tradition as well, with a ceremonial search of the Houses of Parliament before a state opening to ensure that no gunpowder has actually been smuggled in. So I hope you enjoyed that little history lesson. Now I'm actually going to review the actual immersive experience. Apologies in advance if this seems like a bit of a ramble, but I'm purely going on my notes on this and my crumbling memory as well, so hopefully it does make sense. It basically re-arrived, and like I said, it was in the Tower Vaults, which I don't think has actually been open for like 20 years or something, and they completely gutted it. So this is like a new thing that they've put in there, and it's quite like discreet because obviously it's behind all the stuff that they have out for the Tower of London, which is right next door, which is really cool. But yeah, it does have like a thing above the door that has like Gunpowder Plot, so it's really sort of atmospheric and everything. And you walk in and you sign in, and you're shown sort of like a tablet where you have to sort of agree to their terms and conditions just to make sure that they don't get the blame if you like have a heart attack or like wet yourself or anything sort of like bad happens to you, because obviously you just take it sort of like it's your own responsibility if any of that sort of happens. So we signed our lives away basically, and then you go downstairs into the bar area, which has been set out kind of like a sort of old medieval pub. It's not as immersive as you go into the pub as I thought it would be. I seem to remember when we did the War of the Worlds immersive experience, it felt a lot more immersive because you had like one of the machines that was sort of in the ceiling, and all the staff were dressed up like steampunky. With this one, it was very much like it well, just looked like an underground pub sort of thing. Like if you were in Camden, it felt like that's what it felt like. It felt like we were more just gone into a pub in Camden than anything. And the staff were just in layered reality uniform sort of thing. They had barrels around the walls, obviously to represent the barrels of gunpowder. And basically you're given wristbands that have different colours. So obviously when your group colour comes up, what happens is these barrels light up and you hear the poem that you heard at the beginning, remember, 5th of November. And that then tells you when it's your time to go in. So we quickly had a drink because we got there quite early. And they have lockers as well, which took a while to work out because they were all like on a sort of contact, like touch-free card sort of thing, or like a contactless card. So it was trying to figure out which ones work because some of them didn't work, but eventually we figured it out. But it was all free, so that's a good thing. So yeah, we had a drink, and then when our colour was called, we went into this separate room, given sort of like a quick sum up of what was going to happen. While we were in there, it was kind of like they were sort of trying to set the scene, because they had like inscriptions that if you ever go to the Tower of London, they actually have I don't know, I know there's a particular room or like a particular tower in the Tower of London where they have like inscriptions on the wall where basically prisoners were held, and they would inscribe like prayers or sort of like Jane Seymour was here sort of thing, or they'd make like crosses or just different patterns. It's a really beautiful thing to see. It's really tragic though, because obviously you know that most of the people that did this were eventually executed. But yeah, it's basically like they have like plaster cast of these inscriptions, and I think they were from the actual prisoners, like the conspirators from the Gunpowder Plot. And then on the other side they have like a glass case that actually has things from not necessarily the actual Gunpowder Plot itself, but from the time of the Gunpowder Plot. So they had like a plague mask because the plague was rife in London at the time, hence why the opening of Parliament actually happened on the 5th of November. It was meant to happen earlier in, I think in like October, but because of the plague, they actually delayed it to be in November instead, which I think meant that I think they had more time to sort of do stuff with the plot. I'm not like too up on that subject, but I remember reading that the plot was delayed because of the opening of Parliament because of the plague. They had a lantern there. I can't remember exactly if it was Guy Fawkes' actual lantern, but I know they do actually have it. They have it in a museum in Oxford. I think it's the Ashmolean Museum. I will put on the bottom of the screen where it actually is. But I can't remember if it was, I know it was I think it was basically, they have a similar lantern from the time, but the actual lantern is still in the museum in Oxford. And I think they do actually have the actual letter as well that was sent to Lord Monteagle. So it was just amazing things like that, like to just get you sort of into that world and just to like remember like the sort of thing that you're actually getting involved in. So basically, like we were led into this room and it was just like another sort of safety prep, but more in detail. So it's about like, you can't use your phones to record anything, how to use the VR set. Like she actually had one there to just show us what they look like and how to use them. And also like just general things like don't touch the actors and try not to touch the sets too much and like different things like that. Listen to instructions and different things. And then once she'd gone through that, she then gave a history lesson. Basically a sort of cut down version of what I told you. About like how the Catholics were mistreated. Like I said, it was kind of like a history lesson with a twist to what we learned. Like I said, we never really heard the Catholic side of the story when I was in school, because like I said, I think because we're more of a Protestant, well, we're Church of England, but we're more Protestant leaning in this country, so the Catholic side doesn't tend to get listened to, or it gets overlooked. So to hear someone actually give like the history from a Catholic point of view was sort of really new and fresh for me, so I actually found that really interesting. And then when she'd given us that sort of history lesson and basically then explained about the fact that our role within the plot was basically we were going to be Catholic prisoners who would be released to then take part in the plot, and then it was up to us to decide whether or not we would be on the side of the king and try and foil the plot, or if we would actually be on the side of Guy Fawkes and the fellow conspirators in order to blow up Parliament, and it's kind of like that's what it's all about. It's like, which side are you going to be on, and the fact that you can't trust anyone, and all the skullduggery and everything. So it was really intriguing. It's like getting you all psyched up because it's all like dramatic music. And I loved how they did, like, they had, when she was doing the history lessons, it's just it was all like 3D projectors on the wall, because it's all like whitewashed brick walls, so they were able to just project all these different drawings and like different things from the time, just to show like the history and how it's been remembered and different things like that. So it was really, really well done. I was absolutely intrigued and absolutely loved it. It was like I could feel myself getting hyped up as I was watching it. Thought it was so well done. Yeah, as she did that, she then got a wand. So it was like she got a wand up. I think it was meant to be like a long match, because then she lit the map of London, and you just see like this sort of like a fuse being lit. It was really, really well done how it looked like a fuse being lit, and it led to the door that we were about to go through, and then that became the trigger for every room that we went in to know that you need to go on to the next room. It would like light, the fuse would go around the outline of the door. So then we walked through into the next bit, and that's where it basically started, like the actual experience. The first room was you were basically in the Tower of London. You could hear like the dripping water, you could hear the screams of people being tortured and different things like that. And it's also where we got to meet our first actor, like live actor within the experience, who basically was a Catholic prisoner who had been caught, and he knew he was about to be tortured and would most likely die under torture, but it was really moving listening to him, because basically what was happening at the time was, it seemed that, like I said, it was seen as treason to be a Catholic in England at that time. So they would, if they found people that were openly practicing as Catholics, they would take them to the Tower, torture them, try and force them to convert and like denounce Catholicism and the Pope. And if they didn't, they basically killed them and like tortured them until they died, or they would execute them as a traitor. And it was this guy that was just basically fighting with him, like, do I die a martyr, or do I convert so I get to live and see my family again? Because he had like a family, like his daughters and his wife and everything. So it's quite, like, when you think of it, like I said, it's just such an eye-opening experience for someone who didn't really get to hear that part of the story. So yeah, it was quite sort of heart-wrenching to listen to. And then like other characters came in, like his sister came in to visit him and everything, and then he gets led off to his doom pretty much, because she basically convinces him, like, keep your faith, don't let the bastards win, basically. They both go, and then you're led off by another person that we meet called Thomas, and then he basically breaks us out of the prison to go and meet Lady Cecil. And Thomas has got to be like my favourite character out of the entire experience. He was so lively, he was really funny, he was really like interactive with all of us, and like it was kind of like, he reminded me of, I can't think of his name right now, again I'll write it on the screen, but the guy from who used to do the Crystal Maze on the TV, like I used to watch as a kid, and where he'd just be like running around and being like, come on guys, we gotta go and everything, and it was like, hurry up, we're gonna die if you don't keep moving, we gotta go and everything. And it was absolutely fantastic. Yeah, he was like such a treat to listen to. So he basically led us into a section where we could grab cloaks, because obviously we had to wear cloaks because we were fellow conspirators and everything. And that's where he explained again the whole thing of, I'm busting you out even though you're Catholics, because we want you to try and foil this plot. I'm not going to tell you what it is or anything. I'm going to take you to see Lady Cecil because she wants you to do something for her, but you have to wear these cloaks and be like super conspicuous and everything. So we had like these cloaks with the hoods and everything walking around, so that was good. He was absolutely my favourite character. He was absolutely brilliant. I'll put like the name of the guy that actually played him, because I think it's online, and like a picture of it, because yeah, he was my favourite out of all of them. I thought he was brilliant. But yeah, so he takes you to see Lady Cecil, and it's Lady Cecil who explains what she wants you to do and how you're going to be involved in the plot and everything. And again, this was in like a room, it was underground, super secretive, and it was again whitewashed walls, and we were sat on these long benches. And again, you just see like the history and like the images that she's talking about just going around the room, and it was so immersive. Obviously that's the whole point, it's an immersive experience, but it was truly immersive. It was just seeing everything that was going on around the room, like all the drawings of like the tower and of the conspirators and everything like that. And then I think they showed like what would happen if the explosion was to happen, because they're trying to obviously do that as well. They're like, obviously you're given the Catholic side, but you're also given the side of if the plot was to succeed, what would happen. And Westminster at the time, where Parliament is based, was very sort of densely populated, not just by Parliament, but by regular innocent people of the public. It was like they had markets, they obviously had houses where the people lived and different things. It wasn't just an area for politics, it was an area, it was a living area, people lived there. Again, I don't think they wouldn't have known at the time until they discovered later that there was 36 barrels of gunpowder. But 36 barrels of gunpowder, they've actually come to the conclusion that if that had actually successfully gone off, it would have like caused an area of devastation like 1 kilometre like in diameter. It would have been absolutely huge. So how many people would have died, like innocent people would have been killed in that explosion, is just, it doesn't bear thinking about really. And that's kind of what they're trying to get across with like this thing. Like she gets like she's like Lady Cecil is saying to you, it's like, I know you're Catholic, but can you really have it on your conscience if you let this plot happen? What's going to happen to all these innocent people? Like innocent lives will be lost. And that's what she's saying. Like basically this is like, if I can't appeal to you sympathising with like not killing the king and his politicians, then what about the innocent people that are going to be killed in the process? So that's like basically what she does. And then there's a part of it where I don't want to go into too much of it, because obviously I don't want to give too many details in case people want to go for themselves. In order for us to be able to gain trust with the plotters, we have to rescue a priest from the tower. And this leads on to the first VR experience that we have, and it was absolutely brilliant. They have definitely learned their lesson, I think, since they did the War of the Worlds, because War of the Worlds, you had VR and you could walk around. It wasn't like you were sat there static, you could walk around, and I think that was where they went wrong, because they don't really have the technology to be able to do that. With the VR experiences in the Gunpowder Plot, it was all static. You either stood there or you sat there, and it was just a matter of you looking around, and it was just so much better. So with the first one, it was basically you were sat in swings and you were on this pulley with this priest that was in front of you, like, and you were basically going over London on this belt thing, like trying to get him to like a local like house or whatever. So you're basically just going through the air. And this did actually happen. This didn't happen within the Gunpowder Plot itself, but there was a priest, I think, that was smuggled out of the tower using this method. So it's crazy to think that there was like this guy that was just hanging from this rope being like abseiled out of the tower across London. So yeah, apparently that did actually happen, but not within the plot. So this was kind of used as a plot point in the story, and it was really, really well done. So yeah, I was really sort of impressed with that. Another part they did which was really immersive and I thought was absolutely fantastic, and I can understand why when they do these like I said, signing your life away at the beginning of the experience, because there was a very claustrophobic moment after you've rescued the priest where you have to hide in a priest hole because the guards have tracked you down to the house where he's been hidden, and you're there for a good minute at least. It feels like longer, but it's got to be at least a minute. And you're hiding in there, and you can see people walking past the door, because you can see like the crack under the, like between the door and the floor, and you can see people walking up and down. You can hear like people knocking on the door outside, and you can hear as well how they've done really well with the speakers. You can hear dogs sniffing around like under your door and like growling and everything, and it's just like it really gets your anxiety going. I mean, I do have some form of claustrophobia, but not in that sense, because it wasn't too bad. I was in there with my husband and my friend Rosie, but we still had a little bit of space. But I can imagine if you are if you really do suffer with your claustrophobia, being in there by yourself would be awful. I can imagine, yeah, it would be absolutely terrible, especially when you're hearing all these noises going on outside and just that anxiety of being discovered. Even though you know it's pretend, it still gets your anxiety going, like, will you be discovered sort of thing, what's going to happen. But yes, so I think that was absolutely brilliant. I thought that was a really, really good way to get you really sort of immersed in it. So that's like, I won't say too much on what happens in that, but I just thought I'd mention it because it was absolutely fantastic. I think that was one of my highlights that I remember was that I thought that was just so well done. After that, you meet up with someone else, and I think he's like a cousin or something to one of the conspirators, but he's in on the plot in terms of he's working with Lady Cecil as well. So then he basically asks us at that point where you are in terms of, are you for the plot, are you against the plot? And I think we also basically we did a vote as saying like, yeah, we're for the plot, we want Parliament to be blown up, but I think that's more just like 2022 politics bleeding into it's like, yeah, let's blow up Parliament, all full of pricks anyway. Basically he asks you if you're for the plot, and if you are, you're given a code and you have to write down that code. And then basically this is like the halfway point, and they had again they had this with War of the Worlds, where they have like a bar, obviously an opportunity to get more money out of you. So you can have a drink, it's like 15 minutes, you can have a drink while you wait. We asked how much I think they had their signature drink, and it was basically like a Bellini or something, so it was Prosecco with something. And it was like £9, and it's just in, like I said, again, a sort of Prosecco glass. So I was like, no, you're all right. I'm not going to go for that again. So we all just sat around and like talking about like how much we loved the experience so far. And yeah, we just had just a sort of catch up on where we were on everything. And then in order to call you for the next section, you hear like a crow cawing. So then that's when they lead you to the next section. And then the next section is where you actually get to meet Guy Fawkes, who's played by Tom Felton. I did laugh a little bit because he kind of looked like he was trying to play a cowboy from the Wild West, because he kept having a handkerchief across his face. But I get why he does that, and I'll tell you why in a second. Like, you don't meet him in real life. Tom Felton is not actually there. But he did play the part of Guy Fawkes. And again, this is another massive highlight for me. Something that they've taken from War of the Worlds, where it's a VR experience that's taken place in the boat. And I think it's probably one of my favourite bits from the War of the Worlds section, because it was really well done. Like I said, I think they learned from their mistakes with War of the Worlds, where they realised you had to be static when you're doing VR and don't have like groups of people around. And so you're sat in this boat, and ours, I think, was kind of broken because you're supposed to like be like bobbing up and down, obviously, because you're on the River Thames, but ours wasn't moving. So I have a thing, and like we were supposed to knock into a boat as well at one point, and you didn't feel anything, it didn't move, but then halfway through it started moving, so we're like, oh, obviously it got a bit stuck. But other than that, so that kind of took the immersion out, but I don't think that was their fault, that was just the equipment not working. But the VR itself and what you got to see was absolutely amazing. I absolutely loved it. For someone who's as obsessed with history as me, I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. It was just like going along in this little rowboat, and you've got all these ships, like really old, like galleons and everything, that are just parked up. And the sense of scale, it was just absolutely phenomenal. And London Bridge was there, like the original London Bridge. So you had like all the shops and all the buildings and everything still on there. Again, it was just that sense of scale, and you really did feel like you were on the River Thames with all these ships and seeing the London Bridge. It did actually take my breath away. I was like, this looks absolutely stunning. I'm like so impressed by it. It looked absolutely fantastic. And like, as you're looking at like, and I'm just looking around going, this is just absolutely amazing. This is just so beautiful. Guy Fawkes is telling you about like why they're doing the plot and why it's all coming about and how the Catholics have been persecuted and blah, blah, blah. You're on the way to Parliament to help him unload all the gunpowder. And you go on like this little trail as he's like giving sort of his speech about like how it was a just cause and how they'd be seen as heroes and blah, blah, blah and everything like that. So it was really, really well done. So then you get off that. I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to go too much into it. After that, there is a final showdown where you're basically, Guy Fawkes locks you in with the gunpowder and intends to blow you up because he thinks that you're like, because like the guards have found them and he thinks you're part of the conspiracy sort of thing, like or you're there to foil their plot. And so he sort of locks you in, and this is where, like I said, the whole thing with him wearing the bandana around his face is because they have an actor there that obviously isn't Tom Felton, so they have to have someone there to play the part. But what they've actually done, which is really clever, is because he's walking around, it's a big room, and you're in the middle of the room in this cage, and he's there with another actress, and she's interacting with him as they're walking around, but it sounds like his voice is coming from the actor. It's not like you're hearing it from a speaker like above you or whatever, you're hearing it actually from him. So obviously he's got a speaker on him, and it was really, really clear. So it was as if he was actually talking. So I think that was, again, a really, really clever, simple but really clever way of doing it. So it does genuinely sound like the voice is coming from him. And then like there's this big showdown, and obviously you have to get out, and yeah, you finally get out, and obviously the plot is foiled and everything. You're reunited with Lady Cecil, who talks about like how the plot was foiled and everything, and now they've caught the conspirators. And then she takes you to meet the king, and basically again this is like the last VR experience of the day, and I probably think it's like my least favorite, because they don't exactly tell you where to stand, and like you all have these pillars, and there's a sort of shelf where your VR set is on, so you put your VR set on, and I think you're supposed to like, it was like there was like this lit up cage that you're supposed to stand in, but I didn't stand in it, and I was kind of to the side, so you just had this lit up cage there the entire time. I don't know if you stood in it, if the cage would go away, I don't know, but but yeah, it was just a really random way of doing it. So I don't know, if that wasn't just meant to be how you would know where to stand, sort of thing, so you could get the full experience. But from where I was standing, I could see everything. It was just this really annoying light orange cage that was there. It gave like the whole thing. It showed the king talking about plot and everything. I mean, that's the thing, I kind of missed on what the king was actually talking about because of this cage that was there. I was kind of like, I don't know what's going on, why is this cage there, am I supposed to be standing there or whatever. Once the king has done his speech, it's then you and Tom Felton, you're basically going through time, like leading up to present day, and looking at how he's seen. And this is when you learn, as I said at the end of my history lesson, about the Act of Parliament. I never knew there was an actual Act of Parliament that was made so that people had to go to church and people had to celebrate the foiling of the Gunpowder Plot. I literally just thought it was just something the British public had come up with, and Parliament just sort of encouraged it because it was about foiling a plot against them. But yeah, it was like made law that people had to attend church to give thanks for the plot being foiled. I just find that absolutely insane. But yeah, and like I keep saying Tom, Guy is standing with you and he's going on and he's like, what are they doing, like why is this happening, sort of thing. And it goes through with people building bonfires. I can't remember what the different eras were, but I remember particularly there was World War II where people couldn't obviously do the bonfire, so they just had like a candle in their window. Because obviously we had the Blitz and it was basically a wide sort of like nationwide blackout, like you couldn't have any lights on or anything, because then the Luftwaffe would be able to see a light and know that they could drop bombs, because that would be where people were, sort of thing. So yeah, people just lit candles and that was their bonfire for Firework Night, and he's just like asking, is this how people remember me, and like different things. And yes, so it goes all through, and then there was obviously come to modern day, and there's some people that have bonfires, other people have fireworks and like different things. It just ends basically with Guy Fawkes just saying, so how do you see me? Do you see me as a hero, or do you see me as a villain? And it basically comes to, and that's what I think, like, even though it was my least favourite VR experience, I think that's probably what was quite the best thing about it was the writing, how they did it. Like, I thought, like, going through the different times and having Guy Fawkes see for himself like how the celebrations changed over time, and like where he says at the end, like, do you see me as the hero or do you see me as the villain? And you take your headset off. It was quite funny as we were walking out. I don't think someone's was working. Like, I think my friend Rosie said that one of hers, like her set wasn't working. I think it was like her headphones weren't working too well, so it kept like going in and out. But someone obviously didn't have, their headset wasn't working that well, so it kind of just went black or something, or it was really delayed in terms of what they were watching. So as we were leaving, there was someone still just standing there with their VR set on. Someone had to come and tell them that it was over. So yeah, that was quite funny. Yeah, because I think at the end you're told to take it off, and that's how you need to take it off. And I think that might have been actually why Rosie didn't know, because it didn't actually tell her to take it off. So yeah, there's this person just standing there, just being like, la la la, just looking, waiting for something to come up. And then basically you're led into this tunnel, and you're given again this sort of history lesson. And this is where I thought was a really nice touch, because you're told like the history and the actual facts of what the immersive experience put into it. And this is where I think the partnership with historic royal palaces really comes into play, because they tell you basically the history behind, like, the real historic facts behind the people that were in there. The fact that Lady Cecil wasn't actually a real character, she was based on Robert Cecil, who was the king's advisor at the time. So that's who she was based on. And they said about Lord Monteagle's letter, the fact that no one, to this day, no one still knows who wrote the letter. And then it obviously talks about the fact that Guy Fawkes' face, I think pretty much from the film V for Vendetta, and I do need to watch that again, I haven't seen it for years, but the fact that the mask that was used in V for Vendetta has just become sort of like an international symbol for freedom fighters and fighting against sort of tyranny and oppression, and sort of governments being sort of just brainwashing people and different things. The fact that, like, you have groups like Anonymous that use sort of the face of Guy Fawkes as their sort of symbol and different things like that. So it just shows how, like, through time the image of Guy Fawkes has changed. So obviously back then, when it first happened, he was seen as a villain, and he was seen as trying to bring down, like, and he was basically, he was used as like the king and the parliament's propaganda to show, like, look, Catholics really are evil. They tried to blow up your king, who is like head of state, like your king represents order and justice and everything like that, and this guy tried to blow it up. And it's funny when you think about it, because through history no one remembers the other conspirators that were involved. It's always Guy Fawkes that was seen as the figurehead for the plot, even though I don't think he was the one that actually came up with it. I think it might have actually been Robert Catesby that was the original brain, sort of the original conspirator who thought of it and then brought everyone else in to work with him on it. It's just funny how he was seen, like, Guy Fawkes was taken as this figurehead, like I said, propaganda for this evil Catholic regime through history. And it's only been in the last, I would say, 30 years, even less than that, like I said, growing up, like, the Catholic side of the story was just brushed under the carpet. You didn't really learn about that. It's only been in recent years that you're actually seeing, one, the other side of the plot, but also the fact that he wasn't necessarily a villain. It was just at a time when people were just sick of the way that they were being treated. They were sick of the persecution for what they believed in, and they just wanted to do something about it. It wasn't done in a very good way, but it was like, the plot is just a very extreme way of trying to do it. And another thing that was a really good point that was made as well was the priest that you save when he's arguing with someone about who's determined for the plot to take place, and he's like arguing about the fact that so many innocent lives are going to be at stake, and they're saying, well, a handful of lives are worth it when you think of all the people that have been persecuted and tortured and blah blah blah. And the priest again says, but what are we going to do except replace the Protestant regime with a Catholic regime and then torture and persecute people for not being Catholic? So it's just constantly going round and round. And that's the thing that, like, the underlying, I think, issue with the Gunpowder Plot, in terms of people like, he was a freedom fighter, and he died for what he believed in, which is obviously seen as a real sort of heroic thing to be able to do, and a really admirable thing to be able to do. But what would have happened if it had actually succeeded? We would have just gone back to the exact same thing that we were going through before, but for a different reason, for a different religion. So it necessarily wouldn't have been a good thing if the plot had not been foiled. It just, it's just what he been turned into something more than just a Catholic figurehead and a figure of rebellion. He's now seen as a figure, like I said, he's seen as a freedom fighter. And I think sometimes it's worth just taking a step back from that and just being like, well, what sort of differentiates him from being like a modern day terrorist sort of thing? Like, the sort of like what he wanted to do was what we would see as, like, now was modern day terrorism. So it's difficult, like, it's a controversial thing to sort of talk about. But it's one of those things where, like, if someone had tried to do that today, can you imagine how vilified they would be? But yeah, it's just how things have been twisted and remembered over time. It's never black and white. I don't think you can either see him as a hero or a villain. I think you can just see him as someone who was just a victim of an incredibly horrible time in history, and they just obviously couldn't see another way out. And yeah, it was a very extreme method, but times were hard. It's a very good, I think the way they end it with, is he a hero or a villain, I think is a very good discussion point, and I would love to know what you guys think. So yeah, definitely comment below on what you think. Is he a hero or a villain, or do you have the same sort of idea as me in terms of he's neither? It's very grey. He's a hero for standing up for what he believed in, but he was a villain for wanting to go to such extremes to get his, like, basically bring his religion back, pretty much. That's basically what it was all about. It was about getting Catholicism back as the country's main religion. After that tangent, I just went on to just finish by saying that basically after you've been in that tunnel and you've learned all the history and everything, you go to the shop and the bar. So basically you do like a full circle. And the shop was great. I wish there had been more merch in there. There were some really good shirts, but again, it's just like generic sort of like men's t-shirts. There's none of like women's t-shirts, which I like to buy. I prefer the women's sort of cut. We bought a coaster which had a quote in it, and I'm trying to remember what it was. It was something like, there's enough powder here to blow your head to Hammersmith and your arse to Greenwich or something. I can't remember what it was. I'll post a picture of what it had, but I was just like, yes, I want this coaster's good. But they had books on like the Gunpowder Plot. They had matches, like extra long matches. They're on sale. They had like loads of different things, like mugs and different stuff. So there was a lot of merch. I would have preferred, like I said, a bit more variety, but what they had there was good. I thought it was really good. They also had a thing where at the end you could have a photo taken. I don't remember having a photo taken at War of the Worlds. I'm completely sort of at a loss for trying to remember. But obviously the most recent one that we went to, like, experience that we did, which did take your photo, well, was supposed to take your photo and didn't, was the Tomb Raider experience. So this was a vast improvement on that. I can't really compare. That's why I've more compared this to War of the Worlds than the Tomb Raider experience. One, because War of the Worlds and Gunpowder Plot are by the same company, Laid Reality, but also Tomb Raider is meant to be an experience. It's not an immersive experience. So, and it definitely wasn't an immersive experience, I can tell you that. So they take two pictures at the end, and then you get to choose if you want to keep them or not. If you like, you have different sort of price points what you can pay for it. It's quite expensive, but it's a nice souvenir, I think, to take if you can afford it. So so we got both pictures because we went in like joint with Rosie. We got both pictures and we got a nice little booklet. I'll do like a film of the booklet. I'll put it over this because I can't find it right now. I'll show you at some point the booklet. That was that. And then basically what we decided to do is we decided to eat actually in the bar to just kind of keep that experience alive, sort of thing, and just to talk about what we had just been through. I had a pizza, which was basic but really delicious. My husband, I think, had the vegan burger, and Rosie had loaded nachos, which she said was really nice. It wasn't too bad in terms of expense for London prices. I mean, London is naturally expensive anyway because it's the capital city, but like compared to other places I've eaten in London, it wasn't that bad. I think it was like £13 for my pizza. So it weren't, like I said, it weren't too bad. But yeah, the food was really good. Like I said, basic but really good. Obviously, like you could tell with the pizza, it wasn't like hand rolled or like handmade dough. It was kind of like obviously just a dough that they had to hand, and then like they put whatever toppings you wanted on top. But it was a nice dough. It weren't as if it was a crappy dough. It was a really nice, good quality dough. So it's not, like I said, it's not as if it's like cheap food for expensive prices. So yeah, so that's basically our experience of the immersive experience. So I think I would just give like an overall review on what I thought of the experience as a whole. I'm not going to stick around for too long because I am absolutely baking. This room gets really hot, and because I've got the door shut, it's like I'm absolutely cooking in here. But yes, so basically it's an amazing location because it's actually in sort of the area where this all took place. Like, you walk outside of the Tower Vaults and literally right there is the Tower of London where Guy Fawkes and his fellow conspirators were kept. And I don't think they were executed there. I think they were executed in Westminster, I think. That is basically where Guy Fawkes was tortured and kept imprisoned. It's an absolutely fantastic location. The sets were really, really well done. They really used the space really well. It just made the atmosphere absolutely fantastic. Like I said, it was all underground. You had like the use of dry ice and everything, and the sound effects. The speaker system was top notch, so it really did feel like you really did get that immersive experience from like the mix of the sets, like I said, the sound, and I mean the smells probably could have been like, because there wasn't really, but then they probably didn't want people vomiting if they actually had smells of like Jacobean London, but but yeah, that's probably something that they could add, is probably like a more like a smell sort of thing, like that, because you could at least you'd think that you could at least have like the smell of like the damp, and like when you go into someone's house, like the smell of sort of maybe like the wood, like the wooden furniture, or like, especially because they're Catholics, maybe like incense or something, like if they had like priests secretly doing mass and stuff like that. So you'd think there'd be something like that, but there was like fire as well, because obviously it was all about the gunpowder plot, so you'd think, or like the smelling of gunpowder, there was nothing like that there. So I think in order to make it truly immersive, that would have been a nice thing to have the smell. But other than that, everything else, sights, sounds, absolutely top notch. I thought they were absolutely brilliant. I loved the touch of historical fact. I don't know if that's just because where I am such a massive history buff that I just love hearing like historical like facts over, like I do, like I myself, if I watch a historical film, I will go and look at historical facts about it, if it was based on fact or fiction, like just for dramatization or whatever. I love that sort of stuff. So the fact that at the beginning they give you a history lesson in terms of just to catch you up into where you are before you go on the experience, and then at the end to give you the facts behind the fiction, so in terms of like telling you about Lady Cecil, and also the people in, because they give you all the names of the conspirators. They tell you also other characters like Thomas, who we met was based on like a mix of people and like different things like that. It's really nice to have that sort of historical. I just love that sort of thing, and I really do hope. I just loved how they merged like the historic fact with fiction, and like just to explain what was fact, what was fiction, and what was done for dramatization and everything. And I do put that down entirely to historic royal palaces being involved, and I really hope that they do further things, like more stuff with layered reality, because I think they could come up with so much, and I just think it would be such a great partnership for them to keep going. And we've been on a few historic royal palaces sort of things that they do to sort of bring history to life. Like one that we did was about the execution of Charles I, where you can actually go to the spot where he was executed. It's basically, I think it's Whitehall now, I think it's called. But you can go to the actual spot where he was executed, because that used to be an old palace, and he was basically executed on a scaffold outside the palace. And you had these headphones on, and you had these wooden blocks, and you could put them on specific spots around the area, and you can hear like him talking, you can hear other people talking, like eyewitness accounts and different things. You could hear a heartbeat, like his heart beating as he was being led to the scaffold and stuff. So they've always done really, really good events, historic royal palaces, to really bring history to life, but this has got to be one of the best ones, I think, for doing that. So I really, really hope they do work with layered reality more in the future, because yeah, God knows what else they could do. It would be absolutely fantastic. And I really do feel like layered reality have really learned a lot from their experience with War of the Worlds, like I said, with the virtual reality probably being the main thing, and also with the actors. I mean, the actors in War of the Worlds were great, but I just felt they were a lot better in the Gunpowder Plot experience, because there was just such great banter. They were really professional, kept in character the entire time, and there was like one point I could like when it really just showed to me it showed their professionalism in terms of before going into one room. Obviously they were delayed. I don't know if like there was like a technical problem in the next room or something was happening, so we had to be left in the corridor, and they left us outside. Obviously it was like in a sort of mysterious corridor sort of thing, but they kept popping out to be like saying like, oh, something's happened, we have to, like, we can't take you in just yet, but we'll bring you it. But it was like they really kept sort of like the immersion going. It wasn't as if they were like, oh wait, we're having like technical problems, we can't take you in, sort of thing. It was literally like, oh, she's needing to just deal with something, so we'll be with you in a second, sort of thing. So it was really, really well done. Like, they really kept in character. Even when like you had people within the group, I mean, our group was really good. War of the Worlds group was a bit shit that we were with, but we were lucky this time to actually have a group that were really into it. But you would have on occasion people that would like try and make like funny remarks and different things like that, and the characters did really keep within their character. So that was, I'm like really glad that they did that as well, because you can imagine they probably see some people on there that are just absolute dicks. so I can imagine they are really sort of like tested to try and stay in character. Also, I think the writing was top notch. I'm a big fan of Danny Robbins anyway. Like I said, he has his podcast Uncanny. He also done the Batsy Poltergeist, again, which is an absolutely fantastic podcast. If you can find it, I would highly recommend listening to it. Like I said, he does have a play on at the moment, 222, A Ghost Story, which I really want to go and see. I'm trying to get tickets for that. I know he's a really, really good writer. Really, sort of, he knows how to sort of bring the tension, I think, to what he's writing and to the scene that you're in. So I knew that. I mean, it was kind of one of the reasons I wanted to go, other than obviously it being laid reality and historic royal palaces and about the Gunpowder Plot. As soon as I heard like Danny Robbins was involved, I was like, this is like guaranteed I'm there, because I just want to see how he does. And the writing was absolutely fantastic. For me, it was also, as I said before, it was really enlightening hearing the other side of the story, which I really liked, because like I said, I think growing up in a Church of England school, you don't get to hear all sides of the story. As they say, history is written by the victors, and it definitely was that case. Like I said, with the whole thing with Bloody Mary, the fact that she was Mary the First was known as Bloody Mary, and Elizabeth I is seen as like good Queen Bess and a golden age in England's history. And yet it just shows how one-sided England's history is, and people like still don't want to admit that, but it is something that does happen, and it's only just now that people are kind of sort of realizing it. And I do think this experience is a great way of showing that what the other side actually went through, and given the reasons why they did what they did. Like I said, it's a very extreme way of them doing it, but I think because of the time that they were in, and the things that people have been through, it's we can't really put our own sort of experience and morals onto it as much. I think you still can, because obviously it's, like I said, it's like we would see it as modern day terrorism, but it's still a very different time. Like, you were seeing people, like friends and relatives being tortured and killed because of something that you believe in, and religion had a very different role in that era, in terms of it was your life and your blood, and it was a way of life. And if people stopped you going to mass, you basically were convinced that you were going to hell. And it's one of those things that we can't put, like I said, we can't put modern day ideals and morals onto something like that, like, because it's not something we really have to deal with, or that we really see as something that wouldn't be as like, it just wouldn't be as important, like, or not as important, because obviously religion is still a very prevalent part in a lot of people's lives today. For those that don't have a religion, we can't put ourselves in that position to know how it feels to have something that so, like I said, it is basically their life and their daily bread, pardon the pun. It is their life, and you're trying to tell them that is wrong, and in your eyes, if you were to change that, then you're damned for all eternity. So we can't really judge them too harshly, I don't think, on their ideas and what the lengths they would actually go to get revenge, so to speak. The set pieces were absolutely fantastic as well. Like I said, with the room that you first meet Lady Cecil in, and where she talks about the plot and why it needs to be foiled because of the innocent lives that are involved and different things like that, it was really, just absolutely fantastic with, like I said, the 3D projectors that were around, and just really immersing you within the story. And like I said, I do think layered reality have come so far since War of the Worlds. I mean, War of the Worlds did really, really well. There, like I said, there were some bits that weren't perfect, and I keep going back to the VR. The VR wasn't perfect, but they have definitely learnt their lessons from that, and I just found it absolutely fantastic. The prices for drinks weren't great. As I said, in the bar in the middle section, not amazing. Super expensive, but like I said, they have to make their money somewhere other than like ticket prices. Like I said, it's just weird how the alcohol was really expensive, but the food wasn't too bad in terms of price, so it kind of made up for it there. The bar, as I said at the beginning, wasn't very immersive because the staff weren't dressed up. It would have been nice to have like the local tavern wench come in to give you your cider or whatever, and they didn't have like the flasks to for you to drink out of. It was just regular modern day sort of cutlery and glasses and different things like that. So that's something that could have been made more of, I think. And like I said, I think the last point to make is the VR. While it was a little glitchy, it was so much better than the War of the Worlds one, and I definitely think having the audience being stationary is definitely key to keep it as immersive as possible. Like I said, we had like our issues in terms of, and there was some like when you put the VR on, sometimes it would be like too close to your face, or it wouldn't be focused, so you'd be having to fiddle about with it for a bit. But once you got it right, it was fine. I would suggest, if you wear glasses like I do, take your glasses off if you're going to do VR, because there's no need, well, for me, there's no need for me to wear them because I'm short-sighted, and obviously if the screens are like right there in front of your face, you don't need them. So it's difficult to wear. And I said to my friend Rosie, because my friend Rosie wears glasses, after the first VR experience, because she didn't have a good time with it. I think she literally had to hold it in order to be able to watch, and even then it was still like really blurry, so I told her to take her glasses off, and I think after that it was a bit better for her. But yeah, other than sometimes being a bit fiddly to sort out, but then I think that's the case like whenever you put VR on. I think until the technology gets better, that's always going to be a thing that's going to sort of be a critique of VR. It happens like if you have a PlayStation VR or an Oculus or whatever, it's still until you figure out like your focus and where you're going and whatever. It's not literally like you put it on and it's done. You do have to fiddle about with it in order to get it comfortable and to get it sort of where you want it, sort of thing. So yeah, there's that. But obviously the major glitch for us was when you were on the boat and the boat wasn't moving, so it should have been bobbing along. But again, that's just something that happens when like this thing is running all day every day, so there's going to be some technical issues along the way. So I weren't holding it against them, sort of thing, because it made up for it by what we were seeing. So that's my experience of the Gunpowder Immersive Experience. I hope you did enjoy this. It was an absolutely amazing experience to go to. I absolutely loved it. It's definitely been my absolute favourite experience, like of this sort of thing to do. So I don't want to use the word experience too much, because I keep thinking I'm saying experience too much. It was absolutely fantastic, and I would highly, highly recommend it. If you are ever in London and you have a couple of quid to spend, definitely go along. You don't have to eat in the bar, you don't have to drink in the bar. You can always go somewhere that's relatively cheaper. There's lots of places nearby. There is a pub right by Tower of London called Hang Drawn and Quartered, so you can always go there because it fits in with the theme. Yeah, it's just absolutely fantastic. If you want a history lesson, if you just want to have a good laugh with your mates and just really have like a really good experience, I would highly, highly recommend it. So I think I would give it, I guess, an 8 out of 10. I'm going with an 8 because I would love to give it a 10 out of 10, but like I said, because of the glitch with the boat and with the bar not being fully immersive, I think and also, like I said, the alcohol being quite expensive, I think those are like my main gripes. So yes, that's why it gets an 8 out of 10. But I absolutely love the experience, and if you do go, let me know down in the comments below. I would love to know. If you know anything about like the Gunpowder Plot or sort of Guy Fawkes that I have not mentioned, because there's a lot that, like, you could go into so much history. Like I tried to keep the history down to a minimum, because like looking at my timer now, this video is going to be well over an hour. But yeah, there's so much history you could go into about these people and what they went through, and like like there's so much known about Guy Fawkes and the people that were like the conspirators and everything, and also the whole thing of the Reformation in England. Like there's so much I didn't go into because there is just so much history and there's so much politics and different stuff behind it that like leads to what actually happened. And yeah, you just can't put it all in one video. I could, but it would be a very long video. If you'd like me to do that, do let me know, because I do love my history, like I said, so I would love the opportunity to do more history videos. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think. If you have any ideas on what videos you would like me to do in the future, then do let me know. If you have any questions about the Gunpowder Plot, Guy Fawkes or anything like that, or about the actual immersive experience, please do let me know and I'll try and answer them as best as I can. Let me know what you guys think. I would love to hear from you. So on that note, I will end this video here. So if you did enjoy this video, please give us a like, subscribe if you haven't already. You can also follow me on social media, all the links will be down below. I've got a Discord as well that you can join up to, so please do join up to that, so where we could talk about history, we could talk about ghosts, because that's another big love of mine. Would love to have you there. So yeah, please do join up to that. And on that note, yeah, I'll say love you guys, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye.
Remember, the 5th of November. Gunpowder, treason and plot. I know of no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot.